From Cincinnati, Ohio. I've been doing real estate since 1991. Back in the late 90s, I was at Cincinnati REIA trade show and met Dick Dussage, who was the founder of Mid-Ohio Securities at the time. And he was telling me about how you could earn all this tax-free money. And I thought it was just amazing. And at the time, opened a self-directed Roth IRA account. And then a couple of years later, found out about the CISA accounts. And those radically changed our lives just because it's enabled me to pay for my kids' grade school, high school, college, and now my oldest daughter's med school tuition. So it's just those tax-free dollars make a huge difference. So today I'm going to talk about wrap lending. This is one of the techniques I've been using a lot recently to grow smaller accounts. So I have a number of big accounts, but a number of years back, I got our first self-directed HSA account. And so we didn't have much money in there. So I've been using wrap loans to grow that account. And then I also have some nieces and nephews that I'm working on growing their CISA accounts. And with a CISA, you can only contribute $2,000 a year. So that doesn't give you a lot to get started with. And the wraps really allow us to grow those small accounts without a lot of hands-on type of stuff. If you can move on to the next slide. So with this deal, this is, I do a lot of hard money lending. I probably do maybe a loan every other week, typically. So Paul, who is a guy who's referred bunches and bunches of loans to me over the years, he's a wholesaler. And a lot of his clients have borrowed money from me over the years, called and said, hey, I have this deal and need to borrow some money. If you can move on to the next slide. With this particular house, he had bought it a while back. He had paid $48,000 for it, spent $30 rehabbing it, sold it on a lease option for $120, but the buyer wouldn't be ready to qualify for 6 months or so. Paul needed the $60,000 to do another deal. If you can move on to the next slide. So at the time, I only had $6,000 in my wife's HSA account. It was important to her to grow that account just because she's always focused on, ours and our kids' medical needs. And HSA accounts are a good way to sort of get some or save you taxes on current income type of stuff. So the borrower agreed to pay 5 points and 15%. And so it was a real wrappable deal. The only problem was I only had $6,000 in that account. Now I could have done this out of one of my other accounts, but one of my goals was to grow this small account. So I needed another $54,000. If you can move on to the next slide. So I was talking to my next door neighbors. They're currently over in France, exploring the Tour de France. So those are some recent pictures of them. I've done this type of deal with them several times before. And when you do these type of deals, it's important that you build up trust with people and they begin to see what you're doing and that you know what you're doing and that you're bringing them good stuff. Because whenever you involve somebody else in the deal, you want to always be very, very careful with their money. So if you can move on to the next slide. Okay, so they brought the $54,000. So with a wrap mortgage, it's confusing when you first think about it, but then it gets a lot more clear. So they have $54,000. The deal with them is they would get 2 points and 10%. So in the top part of the slide, you can see that they're getting 10% on their $54,000. But then my wife's HSA is getting 15% on that $6,000. But the real magic of the wrap is that my wife's HSA gets 5% on the difference on their money. So which is the difference between 15% and 10%. But in addition to that, for this loan, we charged 5 points. So, 5 points on $6,000 is $300, no big deal there. But the deal with them is they would get 2 points. And so because of the nature of a wrap, my wife's HSA ended up getting 3 points on their money. So that's what, a little over $1,600. So that makes a huge difference. So you're earning more on both the points and the interest. And so the idea of a wrap is you get the difference between the rate that you're charging and the rate the underlying money is charging. If you could move on to the next slide. Okay, so originally, M&T Dog put in $1,000 or $54,000. So 2% of that is they got $1,080 in points. Over the course of 6 months, they got $2,754 in interest for a total of $3,834. So in 6 months, they earned 7.1% on their money. If you annualize that, it ends up being 14.7%. The reason it's not just twice is it's the nature of compounding. Now, the real cool thing here is my wife's HSA ended up getting 300, put in $6,000, got $300 in points, $623.63 in interest on her money, then $1,620 in points on M&T's money, $1,399.51 in interest on M&T's money, plus we on hard money loans we always charge a $695 fee. So putting in $6,000 ended up earning $4,368.14 over the course of 6 months, which is a 72.8% return in 6 months. If you annualize that, now you're starting to see the power of compounding when you move to higher rates. So I always say there are 3 components to the compound interest equation. It's either you put in a bunch of money, you have a very long time, or you earn a very high rate of return. And if the more you can increase your rate of return, it geometrically increases what you can end up with. If you would move on to the next slide. So why did this deal work? Well, and why do I do a lot of these type of deals? Well, I do a lot of hard money loans, so it's easy for me to steer some of them into this type of thing to help build up some accounts that I have that I'm trying to build up. But why would other people put their money into my deal? Well, I know what I'm doing here. I have the ability to generate the paperwork. I have systems in place to collect the money from the borrowers and get it sent to the appropriate accounts. And then there are a lot of people that have a bunch of money in accounts that are scared of the stock market and just have cash sitting. And so they don't have the time to go out and find the deal flow. And then the other thing is, because I'm in second position, I'm taking more risk than they are. So, if the world blows up and, not all the money gets collected, I theoretically have a better chance of being out than they would. Okay, if you would move on to the next slide. Okay, so why do I allow wraps? What's great about wraps? It's one of the techniques that I use to build up my small dollar accounts. And then it's also more interesting in life. Real estate can be a lonely business, but when you involve more people, it's amazing how it gets to be a lot more fun. And you have the ability to go and do more deals. Just, there are times that I run out of money. And if I can bring in other people and still make a deal work with a wrap, it works real well. So there are a couple of neat things with HSA accounts. And it took me a while to learn this because my wife had a real job for a long time. And as part of that, we had an HSA account with her employer. And I was always frustrated that I couldn't do anything with that money. But I was listening to John one time and heard him and actually ask the question, okay, so are you allowed to have two HSA accounts? And the answer is yes. It's just like if the maximum contribution for a family for the year is 7,000 and you put 2,000 in your employer's account, then you can't put more than 5,000 in your second account. So that allows you to set up an account like this to start growing. And then the other incredibly cool thing about HSA accounts is once you open the account, if you keep track of your medical expenses from that day forward, you can take them out at any time in the future. So, when you first open an account like this, you might not want to reimburse yourself right away because you want to have a chance to have that money grow and compound. And then, you always have that slush fund, so to speak, there if you get to the point where you just need extra cash and you can pull that money out of the account, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years later, completely tax-free. Okay, I think that's it. Does anybody have any questions?
Glad you brought up, Bob, that the reason why this works is because that's always the big question. The reason why it works is because you're in a second lien position. So technically your IRA has more risk than the first lien position, which means you can justify a higher return. Am I saying that the right way?
Absolutely. I had that, because I'm in a second position, you would naturally expect there to be a higher rate of return. And there are people that, with wraps, I always say pigs get fat and hogs get slaughtered. So you'll see examples of people do wraps, using $200. I'm not a big fan of that, just because I think it's hard to justify the difference there. There are some people that do a minimum of 20% versus 80%. Especially with small dollar accounts, I'm willing to go down to 10%, but I don't like to go much below that.
Okay. And Bob, I know you know the answer to this and I do, but for everybody's sake, Bob, would you be able to take your HSA, let's say, your wife's HSA, take Amy's HSA, and then in the front seat, if you will, so the primary lender, the first lien lender, could that be your IRA or?
Absolutely not. That's a prohibited transaction because I'm using one of my accounts to disproportionately benefit another one of my accounts. So that's why, I have my next door neighbors here who are not a prohibited party to me. There will be times that I'll take like my wife's traditional IRA and with one of our nieces and nephews, I might allow them to wrap that because there's enough difference, or we're not vertically related at that point.